We're at where the words go down behind the mountain. It's very close to the OK Corral. It's where God rides off, your God, in a saddle. But if we're going to talk about the city and something I want to point to, I'm going ahead and use some words that are very confining, as always. First, I want to point out that by no definition is anyone perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. By any definition. And then, of course, we can take a few moments here and point out that throughout the great land known as the city, ordinary people believe that there is, in varying ways, standards by which to judge perfection. The historical one being religion, to judge yourself either by the prophet that founded the religion or what they state to be the primary rules and regulations of the religion itself. All the way from that to more modern times of a humanistic philosophy that to be perfect you would have to have blah, blah, blah kinds of attitudes and etc. Now all the way from that to a lower end of the spectrum, at least on another level, of physical perfection. So I'm not going to stay here any longer and argue perfect. It is simply that all humans are wired up. It is not some kind of misled cultural phenomenon. It is wired up into humans, or else we would not have the damn word. You should know all this by now. There is some reality genetically, down at the cellular level, to the notion of perfection, of perfect. So, I repeat my opening gamut. From no definition, by no definition, is any human perfect. By none. And I'm just, wherever that takes you. Everybody has a flaw. At the very least, I would refer you back to the spot for the injection molding process of a Barbie or Ken doll. That no matter what they do to one of those dolls, you can say that they're always imperfect because there's at least that one spot where they injected the plastic and the Mattel company or whoever it was played God and created little Ken and Barbie. But they got a flaw. If you're alive, you got a flaw. You're not perfect by any definition. And although I guess this warning should be considered totally relevant to people that's been around here for a while, any of you getting this earlier, I'm going to, without any great hesitation or notice, jump back and forth because of the limitations of words and because of what I'm trying to point towards between what sounds like the literal and then that which at times in the next few minutes surely will strike you as being non-literal. And for the flaw, let me pick out a game leg. I could be talking seriously or I could be talking non-seriously, that is literal or otherwise. We will assume that this game leg, notwithstanding the kinds of attempted modern miracles they do in medicine now, bone transplants and etc., we'll consider that you've got a game leg that can't be fixed. You were born with it. Let us say that that's your flaw. You cannot keep picking at the leg under various names. You cannot be Ken or Barbie and you look down and you find the place where there is that little hole, that little round spot, if not a hole, it's a round spot, where they hooked up the hose to inject the plastic into the mold of Ken and Barbie, and then they can cover it back up, but you can always find it. It's that little circular place. You cannot go the rest of your life picking at that thing. Now that may sound obvious, but notice I say you cannot go the rest of your life picking at that thing under various names because that is what happens. You have got a flaw. If you're alive, you've got a flaw. By any definition and or by some definition. By some standard and or any standard. You have got a flaw. Now, as I press on with this, I want you to recall that I point out that you cannot continue to pick at it under various names because you are wired up in such a way that you will deny it. I say you, I'm speaking as a house brand, that is, everybody. That it's almost a certainty that the flaw itself, were we to name it in a very direct and crude manner, that everyone who has any sophistication, any education, which would include everybody watching this, that by now you would have gone past the crudest point and you would now be calling the injection spot, your game leg, your flaw, you would now be calling it, oh my God, something much more complex, something different. It is no longer your game leg. It is no longer that injection mold entry point. You know, you left that a long time ago. It may have changed names several times, very likely, but it's the same game leg, and you continue to pick at it. It is the point at which you are obviously flawed. Now, to do this, those of you that want to, trying to keep score from the last time we met and I was talking, this is connected to the last time, but it's not a repetition. If you're going to do something like this, I've been calling of late a revolutionary activity, you cannot continue to pick at your flaw under any name. So to use the game leg allegory, you've got two immediate choices. One is assume, because I am, as I start out telling you, I am not discounting, I am not excluding this, assume that you do have a blatant, an operational, an unavoidably or an unavoidable physical flaw, such as a game leg. You've got two choices. One is limp and forget it. But those of you who've been around the block and the universe with me a few times, you know that I mean much more than that, and that's not the end of it, but I'll come back in a minute. Limp and forget it. The other one is you've got to smile, fake it, and walk upright. All right. Now, both of those, speaking in a revolutionary sense, require extraordinary effort. Both of them are miraculous. The first one now, you may think, well, hell, anybody could do that. If indeed I was born with a game leg, if I was born one leg shorter than the other and nothing could be done about it, and you say one of the miraculous or one of the necessary approaches is to go ahead and limp and forget it, and what's miraculous about that? Come now, come now, come now. If you know anything about the nature of the molecular structure that thinks and talks and answers to your name, you know that wherever you have your flaw, wherever your game leg is, it is not possible for you to walk into the city and ignore it. You know that. I sure as hell know it. Life knows it. Your leg knows it. Your cells know it. Just look what common knowledge is. Only one person probably doesn't know it. Of course, I say one person. There's one collection of molecules somewhere on this planet, this whole planet. There's some little collection somewhere that doesn't know. And where could it be? Shall we look for it? Shall we send out a posse? It would indeed be a miraculous, it would be true revolutionary activity if you could limp and forget it. But that is a total act. And I remind you again, this is not limited, and it's not even that important. But it's not limited to physical ills or flaws. You know that. Even you new people must suspect it. If you don't suspect that, you don't suspect anything. You must have thought this was some kind of pyramid sales scheme. Pick up your books and Tupperware as soon as the tape's over. It would indeed be miraculous, and I don't have to say you on this, those of you that suspect anything, that if you can take your flaw and go ahead, and if nothing can be done, that one of the miraculous, one of the revolutionary ways is to go ahead, by God, and limp. Just limp and forget it. But forget it's a big story. Forget it requires that you have a new collection of molecules somewhere in your nervous system because the one that you were born with, the one that noticed the flaw, the one that the God of the Jews said, hey, you folks are naked, and they all looked down and went, ooh. Once they did that, you can't ever undo it. You can't unwind it. Just once somebody says you're flawed, whether it be you or somebody else, and you look and you go, yes, you can't undo it. Not with that set of molecules. That's it. They were there to be conscious of the flaw. They cannot become unconscious of it, and therefore they cannot limp and forget it. They can limp and try to forget it. They can limp and put things in their shoe. They can limp and grow a mustache, just real long. They can limp and drink. They can limp and talk too loud. They can limp and stay home. But limp and forget it, those molecules that once noticed it. It's like the tree of life, to take us back to that great religion. The tree of life, that once they had it, you can't throw the apple back up or what it was they ate. It would take a new set of thinking, seeing molecules in your nervous system to limp and forget it. Now, the other possibility I point out that I am sure at first blush to those who are affected by first blushes would sound more miraculous, and that is to go ahead and smile, pull yourself up, and walk straight. That is, walk like your leg's all right. And those of you perhaps now that are getting warmed up and beginning to suspect a little bit, you know that I am not simply talking about making your leg grow another half an inch. It's being able to absolutely fake it. And if we were dealing with ordinary people, I guess they could believe, well, if you're talking allegorical, that's one thing, but if you're talking physically, literally, it would be even worse. Because I could come closer to hiding it some way psychologically than I could if I actually had a bad foot. How are you going to hide that? Look at mine. Look at my flaw. This cannot be hid, no matter what you say. You got it backwards. Now, the hard part, I'm not talking about just limping, because you may have to limp physically. Observably, your molecules may be arranged in such a way that for the rest of your life, you limp. But that's not what I'm talking about now. You can smile, pull yourself up straight, and you can walk without a limp. You have got to have a new set of molecules, though. You have got to have a new arrangement somewhere in the stalk that passes for your nervous system. Well, it is your nervous system, but it passes for you. It is a willful denial of your leg's effect on consciousness. Now, I bet some of you probably have your brains warmed up enough now that you recall for the last two meetings I've mentioned, especially last time, denial is being a form, approaching a reality, approaching a form of what would be evil for someone attempting to do this. But please note, this time I said a willful denial, not a mechanical denial. Mechanical denial would be what some of you would want to have jumped on the trolley car already when I started this, of saying, well, that's not much miraculous activity. If I had a game leg, to say, well, go ahead and just limp and forget it. Whatever will be, will be. What choice do I have? That's denial. That's mechanical denial. And it doesn't work. It works in the city. It does just what it's supposed to do. But it will not free you from the feeling of imperfection. It will not stop you from picking at it. It would take willful denial. You have got to be aware of it. You have got to be aware that it has a hold on what passes for you. That your game leg is not simply a game leg. It is now a game personality. It's not a bum foot. It's now a bum eye. It's not a twisted ankle. It's now a twisted me. And so on and so on. That you're not simply walking and limping on the left foot. Your consciousness is limping. You continue to pick at it. You favor it. You can change its name. You can buy a new shoe for it. You can buy bandages and wrap it up. You can buy little signs that say, do not look down here. But you are favoring the foot. And when you do it mechanically, you are denying the effect it has. That an ordinary person limps in. They announce, I'm flawed. And sure enough, somebody says, oh, skiing accident or what is it? Oh, no, I was born like this. It is a denial. You're denying that this has any effect. That's in the city. That's the mechanical part. A willful denial is another schematic completely. A willful denial is such that if you do it right, I'll give you your choice here, because some of you may have to work yourself up to seeing this, so I'll give you what appears to be a choice. If you willfully deny something, like your game leg, then there's one of two things happen. Other people either no longer see it, or, to give you a way out, if you got to sneak up on it, there's some kind of magic involved that nobody else seems to have the nerve to ever mention it. And don't get hung up on nerve either. It's just like nobody ever mentions it. Maybe they're afraid to, maybe they, who knows what. I'm not going to try to describe it for you. I'm going to play like I don't know. That is willful denial. That perhaps if we're talking about that end of the electromagnetic spectrum wherein our eyeballs and our molecules see, that you walk in and other people there see this happen. And you can do it in such a way that nobody either sees it anymore or nobody ever acknowledges it. That is a willful denial. You are withdrawing the game leg from your consciousness. You are withdrawing the game leg as being part of you. It is a total, it is a willful denial that this means shit. Okay, I will. I'm not talking about game legs. That's nothing. It's just parables. Or what do you call them? Allegories. Allegories. If you can't learn to deny the flaw, you will pick at it forever. Almost all of you that have been around here for any length of time, you've run up against this. I just never described it this way. It is a place that you seem to have your foot nailed to the floor. It's a place that you seem to keep repeating the same sorts of behavior that brings me and you up face to face, and me say, well, this is about the end of it. In some cases, I've told people, as you know, well, this is the end of it. And it was never anything astounding. It was never anything surprising. It was always something that the people had done before. Being around this kind of activity oftentimes causes people to believe that they have changed the name of the flaw. But no, wait a minute. No. I know what you're saying. But that's not what you mentioned to me last year. No. It's always the same thing. I mean, it's almost, if you begin to see it. I'm saying almost, remember. I can do that if Kyroots can. It's almost enough to make me believe in your forefathers' gods. To think that he was so nice, what I'm getting at, follow me, is that he only gave everybody one real flaw. So you think, you and everybody else, if you're back at city level consciousness, that you got this whole menu full of flaws. Maybe one or two real bad ones and a whole bunch of small ones you got to work on. That's not true. No. As far as it has any pertinence, any meaning, you just got one flaw. So if you want to be religious, thank your forefathers' gods. He just gave everybody one, but you keep renaming it. But you keep picking at it. And once you see that, some of you should be able to hear this tonight if you hadn't already. It's the same thing. It's that one spot over and over. Sometimes it seems to move in the city. It seems to move when you got married. It seems to get moved maybe when you got divorced, when you became a mother or a father, or maybe when you graduated from college. But it's the same place. It's the same game leg. If you cannot learn to either absolutely limp and forget it, then you have got to be able to deny it willfully, to deny that it has any effect on you. And by deny, of course, I do not mean verbally. You have to operationally work in such a way that your game leg, your imperfection, God knows I hate to keep pointing that out, but remember I said everybody, that you've got to deny it through the functions of the way in which you operate, not verbally to say it's not true, because if you lower yourself back to that level, it's got you again. You're not doing it right, because you got no business having anybody point out to you, if anybody even look, like, ooh, you're not doing it right. The willful denial is that it has no longer an effect, that you're dealing with a different set of molecules that answer to your name. You're dealing with a different set of molecules that no longer are aware of the fact that you're flawed. It's like a brand new manager came in. It's like a brand new person bought your diner, and all the troubles that the previous owner had, the information did not seem to reach the new owner. And for whatever reason, the new owner does not seem inclined to even hear about them, which is my kind of new owner. Who wants to buy a business and then have somebody say, oh, by the way, 2 of the ovens are gone, the hot water heater is about to blow up. Who wants to hear that? It's like coming down at Christmas and finding out, yeah, you got an electric train, but playing with it will give you scurvy. You recall several meetings back I had someone read that little curio that I came up with of what might be included on a revolutionist code of conduct, if there was such a code. So since I've already drawn it out into the curio arena, let me point out that if there was such a code, and if you were attempting to heed it in any way, and if, which would be a parallel, a corollary with this, that if you had any respect whatsoever for life, which would mean that you had some respect for you, you would absolutely, under any and all conditions, refuse to favor your game leg. You would refuse to, you would not let it hold on to consciousness. You would not be conscious in that place in you any longer that the game leg was part of it. It is really disgraceful. Because it doesn't matter if you physically have a game leg, if you've got a foot turned backwards, if you've got some kind of open blister on a foot. Maybe that doesn't sound as bad, that nobody can cure. You'd walk on that son of a bitch and that'd be the end of it. It could bleed, it would pucker up and swell up, and every morning when you stepped on it, it would burst anew. But if you would favor it, that is, if you will consciously, at line level, acknowledge it, which becomes a form of denial then, if you do that, you are showing absolutely no respect for you. You've got no respect for life itself, and you certainly are not engaged in any kind of revolutionary activity. Let me drag this right quick even further. If there was such a code of conduct, there would be many other parts to it, and someday I may add some more and let you have son of curio, pseudo fictitious code of conduct. But one of them would be a form, in fact, if I'm not badly mistaken, I've heard versions, verbal, physical versions of this popping up in other times and places in history. But if there was such a code of conduct, somewhere in it would be the notion, if not directive, that a revolutionist would have to learn to choose in a binary contest, configuration, confrontation, and a choice between life and death. A real revolutionist would have to already have themselves steeled to the point that they would choose death. But for those of you still worried about whether a game leg is actually true, I'm not necessarily talking about actually dying. It would be on the basis that you would have to give up your preference for ordinary life as mechanical denial and as a status struggle. That whereas everybody is wired up for city life, everyone is wired up to live at land level consciousness, and they are wired up, except for the few extremes which we're not going into, but everyone is wired up to favor life over death. If you ask people, do you want to live or die? Everybody, of course, says, I'd like to live. But people don't just want to live. That's not sufficient for life. That would not keep humanity hopping. So you have got an enhanced, mechanically enhanced status struggle within the pack known as humanity. And so it's not just satisfactory. It's not efficient enough for life to have people just desiring to live. They want to live in such a way that those higher up in the pack begin to notice them and approve of them, and they try to imitate them, and those lower, they try and subdue them and dominate them even more. From the revolutionist view, you have got to, and there's no way to plan for this. You cannot arrange your molecules as they are now. You can't learn how to do it. It has to come from a different place. You have got to prefer, under these conditions, you've got to prefer death. There can't be any question about it. If there is the contest between what do people think of me and people laughing at me, there can't be any question. You can't stand around your game leg and wonder. You can't try and weigh the pros and cons. The difference between being noticed and apparently treated with indifference, which in the bourgeoisie scheme of city life is a form of death. Your preference has to be for death. It has to be the abandonment of the kind of status struggle. You have got to abandon your preference for just routine respect. You've got to be able to abandon the life that is based upon wanting to move up, wanting to gain the approval of some other, pardon me for saying it, fucking human being. Which, as I said, under conditions the rat pack in the city, all you're dealing with is behavior that is becoming for hogs and rats, wolves, prairie dogs. And you are engaged in, you are preferring, you are allowing yourself to operate on the basis that, although it goes by the names, of course, of improving oneself, bettering yourself, preparing more beneficial circumstances for your children, for future generations. It's all one little prairie dog, as cute as they are, but it's one little prairie dog trying to bite the flanks of another one while simultaneously trying to bow to a bigger one. Of yes sir, yes sir. Sorry we didn't have that chocolate milk over in there when you drove up. I'll get that other little prairie dog. That is all you're doing. That is all you're supposed to do, though. That is the preference in the city for life over death. A failure in the struggle to improve oneself, a dropping down in the social order, is a form of death in the city. But given the choice between life and death of that nature, the revolutionist has got to prefer death. Got to prefer it. Cannot stand around and think about it. It is one reason. How about those of you that want to hear me repeat myself? How about let's go back years and years I used to point out the need to have a very clean, one clean blade on you, a scalpel. That everybody's walking around, everybody's born with a rusty knife. And every time you try to do something, every time you apparently try to operate on you, much less operate on other people, it's a sawing. You can't really cut good and you get infected and you can't, Whereas if you got one good scalpel, you go, that's it. That kind of blow does not require planning. You do not go to West Point to learn to take one extremely sharp blade and cut the end of your finger off or the end of somebody else's finger off. You do not. What planning is there? What kind of strategy? You're just prepared to do it. That is the kind of preparation. That is the kind of understanding you have got to have to be able to prefer this kind of allegorical death over life. You've got to already be wired up in such a way through your own efforts that you will immediately abandon when you're confronted continually, what you are, with the preference over, do I want to live this life, or in a sense, would I prefer a death to this kind of life? There can't be a choice. There's no room for strategy. There's not time for it. It's irrelevant. Of course, you might note that in the city it's just the opposite. They believe that the planning, the thinking of it, not only may be as good as doing it, but most of them believe it's the only thing necessary. If you don't believe that, then in your spare time, I'm not sure we've got time tonight, tell me why it is you think that Christianity got so goddamn popular. Not it alone, but it just, at one stage in human development, it had it down to near perfection compared to the rest of those, what you call them, religions. And that is, hey, the gods have told us how to behave, but they finally point out to us that it's impossible for us to do it. So, hey, no sweat. For sure, no sweat. There you are. They believe what I started to point towards, religions, and I was about to single out Christianity, that it is the planning, it is the thinking about it, just simply talking about it. If I have one man, one woman, say, all right, here's what we should do, here's what the God said we should do. Some of the God's spokesman said this, and you listen and think, it sounds right, it feels right. We are all flawed, and that sounds, if I live like that, if I live by the 14 commandments, if I live by the orange book, if I live by whatever it is, it just strikes you. I won't even go into the dance going on that there's somebody up there in charge that says, hey, if you live like this, you'd be perfect. We'll just bypass that, whether you and 10 billion other people are dancing with that one cat, and he's leading, as he's supposed to. We'll disregard that possibility. It is simply, it seems as though in your own nervous system that things vibrate, and it's an affirmative response that yes, that'd be perfection. But notice, nobody expects it. In fact, why I started out with Christianity, among others, is they point out right out front, hey, before you give us your money or call yourself a Christian, let me point out the best thing about Christianity. You don't have to do it. As I say, it's true, the rest of them, but Christianity kind of moved it right up front. Is, hey, listen, we got the ideas, we got the preparation, we got the plans, we know exactly what to do. Now wait, don't say anything yet, because everybody's ready like, well hell, they knew that, the religion I'm trying to get out of. They said, no, we know what to do, but wait, you don't have to do it. What a relief. All right. Maybe I'm getting pretty bleak here, but that's the very kind of thing that you can't do and do this. Now, you can't help it for a long time, and you take for a long time what I seem to be talking about. I've been referring to as fresh data and new info, and you keep doing the same thing. It's all right, I understand it, I could predict it, I know how things operate. Either that or I don't know how things operate, do I? You can write it down, you can think about it, you can try to rewrite it yourself, you come up with your own versions of it. But it's still, in a sense, a kind of strategy that you're trying to be a Christian, a Jew by studying the book, by studying the rules. But you're not wired up to do it. Nobody is. There's got to be a new set of rules to begin with. There's got to be meaningful. That is, they can't have come from the city, not the present time, the present city. And secondly, there's got to be a new part of your nervous system to be able to hear the new information and understand that this is something to be done, not something to be strategized. You cannot plan how to do this. You either do it or you don't do it. You cannot plan to say, all right, I'm going to, since I am infirm, since I am flawed, I might as well face up to it. All right, I'm going ahead and limp. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm going to limp, but I'm just going to ignore it. I'm going to forget it. You're done for. That's your strategy. You can't do that. You cannot plan to forget something. Somewhere in my curio code would also be, if I continued it at some time, would be something along this lines, that you cannot be a revolutionary Philistine. That is, you cannot, and I'm not changing the subject much, those of you keeping track, are worried about where it's going. So I'm trying to ease in case we're going to hit turbulent air. Of course, I've always believed that the pilots just did that, at least part of the time. That they just announced that we got some turbulent air probably coming up, and then they do it on purpose. And now, real quick, if you went that far with me off the side, why did I bring that up? For a cheap laugh? Nuh-uh. Yeah, but you wouldn't do that to us, would you? At any rate, where was I? That in a sense you cannot be, and you should watch out for it. Everybody's got a touch of this, of being a kind of revolutionist Philistine. That is, you end up trying to always calculate potential profits and losses of status. And you do it. Everybody's wired up to do some of it, even involved with this. What if one of my old friends, an old girlfriend, old boyfriend, one of my close buddies I had back in school, what if they knew, what if they just saw a tape of you doing this one time and they found out that my life was now kind of centered around this, and they just saw one tape? I'd do almost anything, you just know that you wouldn't want that to happen. And don't try and hurl so many hand grenades verbally at me if we were going to discuss it that I wouldn't understand what was going on. Well, lack of preparation. Well, I think the world of so-and-so, but there were never incidents such as this. Now, I told you last time, you've had 3 or 4 days here, for those of you that really want to pursue it, that out in life, other than being physically ill, the rest of it's one thing. It's fighting for pack position. It's not you concerned over your friend and their sensibilities. Everybody has a dose of being a kind of Philistine, that there is the continual attempted calculation of potential profit and loss to everything you do. With the profit and loss, no matter what it's called, bettering yourself, being a better person. That's the real cheap way out. That is the gutless way out. I think, in fact, Kyroots, I hate to second guess him, but I think he's got something shortly coming up about that in the upcoming weeks or months. But that is truly gutless. That is the final refuge, pardon me, whoever it was, Jonathan Swift or Horace Walpole, but that is the final refuge of scoundrels and cowards, is to say, well, I'm trying to better myself. That's the last ditch stand. That is the way life is wired up in a tight, male, female, tall, short, Christian, Jew, Buddhist, when really cornered, like a good old rat, and say, hey, I'm just trying to better myself. And that will just about stop traffic stop a mugging in the city, for a few moments at least, is how can you attack a poor little rat, a poor little person, trying to better themselves? It's the act of a Philistine. It is the crudest sort of continual, instead of a brain, or as they like to say out in the city, instead of a heart, a soul, you got a goddamn pocket calculator. And you're continually trying to calculate potential profit and loss. How am I dressed? What I drive up in here? What if I say this to somebody? What if I don't react? What if when they make a racial or a sexual or a religious joke? What if I don't laugh along? What if I don't at least smile? What if I don't join in? What if I don't act sarcastic? What? You're mashing the damn keys on a calculator. And it's got nothing to do with religion. It's got nothing to do with race. It's got nothing to do with sex. It's got nothing to do with culture. It's got everything to do with one thing. How many dogs are ahead of me and how many dogs are behind me? And that's it. That's the way it's supposed to be. That is the nature of the city. Appearances. The refuge of the gutless. Bettering myself. The refuge of the extreme coward. The living coward. A man or a woman who will limp forever. And if you don't notice it, they'll take their damn leg and rub it in your nose. Which is, of course, not the real point. They rub it in their nose. If you continue to allow yourself, the self that seems to be you now, the me among the we's, if you continue to allow yourself to run daily, momentarily, moment by moment, with this heretofore unnoticed attempted calculation of potential profit and loss vis-a-vis your status, where you are in the herd, what it does, it renders what should be your respect and your regard for life and for being here, it renders it without any value left. Anybody newer seen these tapes? This is not an attack on civilization or society. But note that throughout history, day by day, week in and week out, somebody's attacking. We're all going downhill. No more moral values, blah, 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 blah. I'm telling you that from the view of trying to do this, that this is, in a sense, the kind of reality that reflects itself in the city with ordinary people, of them saying, well, we've got no sense of values anymore. We don't treat our old people the way I used to treat, the way our generation. We don't have the same kind of spiritual interest that they did 500 years ago, etc., cha-cha-cha. There is a reality to that. It's not true. It's not correct. But there is a reality to it, and the reality you can see and feel in your own nervous system. The few people that get involved with this, in that, when everything is an attempted calculation as to the potential profit and loss of my status, you end up and you've got no taste for any value in life. There is none. No, I don't have to say that the gods are dead. Hell, you kill them. Nothing, what is greater than the respect of those I respect? Who the hell needs gods? Who needs some aim? Not if I can get a new car. Not if I can get a new wardrobe before the styles change and I lose track of what's going on. When it is the continual attempted calculation of potential profit and loss vis-a-vis your position in the pack, I assure you, in the city it doesn't matter, that's the way it is, but I assure you people, you end up, and there seems to be no basis even for this, except me. You feel like, well, I got to cling to him. But there seems to be nothing outside of you that has any value. Well, you think this does, and you're trying to, the enjoyment you get out of it, but it's like you no longer have any respect for life. It's all just a bunch of molecules, everything's mechanical, there's a whole bunch of rats running around blind, I'm glad I'm out of it. If you feel that way, you ain't out of it. See, because you're calculating the profit. But boy, I'm glad I'm not there anymore. Wrong. You're saying, boy, I'm glad I don't limp. You cannot operate your life in a revolutionary manner when you're continually driven, when you're continually attempting to calculate your potential profit and loss vis-a-vis everybody else, vis-a-vis life in the city, in regards to the standards of status for the pack of humanity. You do that and you end up, personally, you individually, with no respect for life, no respect for yourself, and it is a disgrace. Somewhat more personal note. Within the groups of people that ever become involved collectively in attempting to do something like this, such as the people I'm talking to here and the people that are receiving these tapes in other cities, within these kind of groups of collectively attempted revolutionary activity, something specifically that I am almost forced to return to periodically, but I want to point out that there is an absolute denial of your respect for life and for this activity, for you in any way to mistreat someone in this group, to turn your back on them in some way. Specifically, though, because this is when it gets the worst, this is when it gets the gamiest between people. Someone that you at one time call friend or lover, and then apparently there's been some friction, such as a love affair breaking up, or between two friends believing that there was some sort of misunderstanding. Go back and look at the pack. Go back and look at the imagined hierarchy. What is it when there's been a misunderstanding? What is it when you've been insulted? Of course, here it seems worse. Well, what is it? It's a dog that you considered no better than you in the pack had the nerve to growl at you. If you return that, if you go along with that kind of hardwired, dirt level, very questionable dance to music that just barely passes for being music in the bushes at least, it is truly disgraceful. You have no respect whatsoever for revolutionary activity. You got no respect for life. You're back into an imaginary struggle between you and another animal. But here it is specifically costly, not in a way that you can calculate status-wise, but it is costly for you to mistreat in any way, to speak ill of them, speak sarcastically of them, to allow your molecules to think evil and ill of them. Somebody that you at one time called lover or friend. It is a despicable act. It is extremely costly. It can kill you. If I didn't. Well, I'm speaking about disgrace. I don't recall ever speaking, even using the term. Let me point out, for a real revolutionist, somebody that really gets up to speed, somebody that's not limited to the city-born collection of molecules that heretofore has thought and spoke for you, as always, there is some reality behind anything that comes out in the city. And since I brought up disgrace, let me tell you what real disgrace would be, or a form of disgrace that would be possible for someone who was actually involved on a continuing basis with this kind of activity. That would be for you to inwardly know that you had failed in your duty. And that's a disgrace. Nobody has to tell you once you get going. Once you get to some sort of speed, nobody has to tell you. It's not guilt. Guilt's wearing wingtip shoes, a tuxedo. Guilt is picking up the wrong salad fork at the banquet. That's all guilt is. Guilt is showing up in a brown suit when there's a black tie affair. Guilt, nobody has to tell you. It's not guilt. Guilt's wearing wingtip shoes with a tuxedo. Guilt is picking up the wrong salad fork at the banquet. That's all guilt is. Guilt is showing up in a brown suit when there's a black tie affair. Guilt is being found out there at the banquet that you actually crashed the party. Disgrace is something else. Disgrace, if we had a true code of conduct, now it's early in the year, how about a great flight of what? Yeah, fancy. And say that, at least in the 3D world, there'd only be 3 possibilities for the end of a real revolutionist. That'd be, you would either have to get slain, you would have to be thrown out of the revolution, or you would have to find some form of hara-kiri. That would be the only relief from real disgrace. That you would have to willfully choose death. No, I'm not talking about killing yourself. Am I? The real disgrace would be to realize that you had failed in doing your duty. And if you had that kind of understanding, then, as strange as your silence seems to show, for me taking the nerve to go off on that one, but if you understood that, then you would understand why I even facetiously brought up that there would be only 3 possible ends: to be killed, to be thrown out, or to kill yourself. And as I assume some of you know, it's been reported throughout history that there have been groups of people that supposedly had some code of behavior that required that once they were subject to certain pressures, or if they had engaged in certain forbidden behavior, that the only honorable way out was for them to go ahead and take their own life. That they would be under those very low-level red circuit conditions to choose a form of physical death over that of a disgraced life. But now I'm talking to you on another level. But I'm telling you that there is a kind of disgrace that is possible. Some of the times that I have really been, if I may say so, disappointed into the 4th dimension with some of you people is for you to do something disgraceful and then not to fuck realize it, then attempt to deny it, then attempt to bypass it, then attempt to examine it, then attempt to pick at it, then an attempt to rename it. That the shame is that you got no shame. The disgrace of it is that you felt no disgrace. And you cannot operate on the basis of me, although you try to, of me being able to apparently have the effect on you to say, good boy, good little girl. You know, I do that with a dog. Or to say, bad boy, boy. Down, out. Go in the other room. Get out of the house. You wag your tail and you smile as much as a little doggy can. But that does not produce disgrace. That can produce guilt, produce fear. You feel like you're losing your position in the hierarchy. There's only one place to feel disgrace, and that's what I was describing. It has to be an inward knowledge that you failed in your duty. An inward knowledge, you've got to know it. But you've got to have some respect to start with. You've got to have a new understanding of what you're attempting to do. There has to be a respect for life itself, not some theoretical feeling of worship of nature gods, the idea of some theoretical goodness in all of humanity. It cannot be that, because you can get that in religion. They teach that back in the city under various guises. There has to be a respect for life, that what life does, it does not deny. It denies it through men at this level, but life will not deny what it does. And life does not limp. Only men limp. Only men deny what they do. It is part of the process to keep everything what? Active. To keep it mildly what? Interesting. And to produce, of course, the ultimate contrast, guilt. Not disgrace, but guilt. But it always seems as though guilt, when I say it seems, I'm saying that this is reality. This is the verbal reality in the city. The guilt is always dependent upon and out there. I would not be guilty if I hadn't been raised a strict Catholic. Jesus, I wouldn't be like I am. Sure you would. If you'd been raised a Jew, you'd be a guilty Jew. Been raised a Muslim, you'd be a guilty Muslim. If you've been raised with no religion, boy, would you feel guilty about being an atheist. But real disgrace, only you can do it. Only you can feel it, and it's not dependent upon anyone. In fact, no one should know it, which is safe enough to say because you should not do anything disgraceful. But if you did, in fact, I had a story. I guess I'm fixing to steal it because I think I mentioned it one night over some kind of libations with one of Kyroots representatives. But how about the old story that they've got in just about every religion? Well, they got them in the world's 3 leading religions anyway. And that is that somewhere in the netherworld that they are recording everything you say. But the story, as it comes out, is then they're going to use the recorded words you said as the way to judge your kind of punishment or reward. But what if it's this? What if indeed somewhere somebody is recording everything you say, but not to use to judge your kind of punishment, but they're going to get you there and they're going to play it all back to you, and that is the punishment. Well, I like it. That is, it scares the shit out of me to think about that. There was a connection, if no one was following, between that and me saying, see, that would be disgraceful. Not shame-producing, not that I'd feel guilty if people heard the kinds of things that I said in the middle of the night when it's dark and I trip my toe. And here I am, a priest in the daytime. In the dark, when I trip my toe, I'll holler, goddamn motherfucker, like anybody else. Oh, it's a good thing my parishioners didn't hear that. Disgrace is that you heard it. But who's got that kind of disgrace? You don't have to scratch your head and look around and think about it, or whether you've ever seen it in a movie. Nobody! They're not supposed to. But if you got no respect, if you have not developed some sort of respect based upon your own understanding of how things are, that life deserves a hand, not humanity. Once you begin to see what life is and to realize that that motherfucker will not limp, it won't. But first you've got to see what it goes through. You're worried about your game foot. You got to look at life once you begin to see it. Take every game foot in the world. How many we got? Just, take a guess right now. What have we got? 14 million game feet. And you think yours is bad. Look at it that way. That life has got it 14 million times worse. Do you ever hear life cry? Do you ever hear life give an apology? Do you ever hear life say, I'm sorry I'm late? Yeah. You ever seen life bend over and rip its pants? Use the wrong fork? That's the kind of respect. But you've got to be able to see it. And when you see it, then you can feel a kind of disgrace when you deny what life does. When you deny what you should be doing that you know is possible. Because something extraordinary is possible, or you would have never seen that much. But then to turn around and to spit on it, to mistreat somebody here, to ignore somebody, to turn your back on somebody, to treat somebody as though they're not worthy of your concern, to treat somebody like that, in fact, that they're worthy of some little smidgen, at least, of revenge. You are a cheap rat. You are, think of the lowest animal possible that runs in packs. And you are it. No matter what you call it, no matter what conditions you think you can conjure up that brought about this strained relationship, it's a status struggle. And you're back literally. Sure, you can talk, you can drive a car, you can pass for being conscious, but you are back literally at the level of rats, mice, wolves. I hate to say wolves because I got some regard for them. It's no importance. Skunks. Weasels, ferrets, badgers, beavers. Pick out one that you don't particularly like. That's what you are. And under those conditions, there is no way. You cannot make a dog feel disgraced. You can scare him. I hear people even say, well, my dog will act guilty. If I come in, he's chewed up something. As soon as I open the door, his ears will go down, and he'll start wagging his tail, and he looks at me guilty. No, he doesn't. He's frightened. Because to him, you're a dominant animal. That's all it is. But I know why people say, well, he looks guilty. You know he did wrong. You might as well be looking in a mirror. That's the worst. That's the best that human can come up with. They got no respect for life because they got no understanding of life. They've got no respect for themselves because they have no understanding of how things operate. And therefore they can't feel disgraced. They could not contemplate hara-kiri. They could not consider that the only honorable way out is to kill myself. No, that's ridiculous. Fuck it, I'll limp. Everybody else limps. And just because I tripped again, what the hell do you want from me? Like I said, nobody's perfect. Everybody's flawed. But if you let that hold your consciousness, if you let that grip you, then it's disgraceful. And you can't move. You won't get anywhere with this. In fact, you can, if I allowed it, you could hang around from a certain kind of view right there at the edge of the campfire a long time and begin to find a brand new rationalization. That is a new name for your blister, for your flaw. You would rename it, and you would sincerely believe. Some of you have been through those stages of this, and I've managed to knock most of you out of it. You didn't notice it. But you would believe that, hey, I'm getting better. I'm a lot better than I was, just in a matter of weeks, months. Since meeting up with us, I feel much better now. And all you have done is rename the leg. You're still picking at the flaw, and you call it something else. If you saw yourself limping from a revolutionary view, you would be disgraced by it. Not guilty, you would be disgraced. As I said, if you were following, there is a built-in justice because you would have to be seeing yourself, that is, you would have to be conscious and aware of what you are in the scheme of things from a new collection of molecules to see that to start with. And so then the justice of it being, it becomes harder and harder to do that which is disgraceful. It becomes no longer a matter of strategy or of you planning of what profit. Can I be a little disgraceful? I just got to get even with somebody and he'll never know about it or nobody else will know about it. I deserve a break today. And since I can't have McDonald's, I'll put a zinger to that person. It just becomes more and more a matter that it's like your game leg. That apparently somebody kicked me. All my molecules tell me I got mistreated, that I got the short end of some bargain, and therefore I got to get even. Just a little bit. Some way. It's similar to what I started out earlier this evening, speaking about one of the miraculous approaches to having a game leg is, all right, go ahead and limp and forget it. There seems to be the itch in you to do something disgraceful. But you cannot plan a strategy about how to get around it, or I won't do that, I'll cut down on it. Yeah. I know, I'll cut down on smoking, I'll quit drinking this way, I'll cut down from a fifth a day to half a fifth a day. And let's see, at that rate, where's my calculator? At that rate, it'll be no later than what, April of 89, 90, I'll be off the juice. You know better than that. If you would not be disgraced by doing it one more time, you're not going to be more disgraced a year from now, 2 years from now. You cannot gradually wean yourself from ordinary guilt into some kind of super form of disgrace. You cannot plot suicide. You cannot create strategy in such a way that from now on, when I am confronted with what I should do, what my duty in a revolutionary sense is, and what I may be inclined to do, I don't know, I'm going to create some new patterns, little reminders and stuff. I'll get a little strap around my wrist that says, I'll write down one of the mottos that you've said before. I work out this strategy, and I'm going to kind of gradually work myself into my armor. For a long time, I can talk in such a way that it sounds like that's possible. It feels like it's possible. You feel like I'm gradually getting better. I'm gradually scratching my sore less and less. I know it seems that way. It has to seem that way. There has to be the impression that we're going somewhere. But there comes a time that you can no longer wait for the grand finale. You cannot sit there and wait for the third act. You're it. You can't sit there and wait for the third act. You're the play. You cannot wait to see how it's going to come out. You are the ending. And you believe that you're sitting there and you're watching the play. You are it. What a great choices. I can stop. That's what I was doing, considering stopping. I could go on. Or I could tear up the styrofoam cup, pull it into my belly and rip it, and be done with it. Well, first I think I'll finish this coffee because I'd hate to get it on my clean clothes when I... All right, one more thing. People still like me, I can tell. Like me mentioning things about possessions. Possessions, if we're not talking about an iron lung, a hospital bed, food, shelter, if we're not talking about that, then all your possessions, we're talking about one thing. We're talking about status artifacts. We're talking about things by which you are attempting to beat down those below you and to show those above you, hey, look what good taste I got. If I had a little more money, I could imitate you folks better. And I know that some of you, back when I, some months back, first mentioned possessions and apparently made very direct comments about how your possessions end up being in categories that fit neither the beautiful nor the useful, and then asking you the great musical question, what in the hell are you doing with them? And then some of you even tried, you couldn't hide it. Some of you tried to steel yourself up to the level of going through your possessions and pick out everything that was not useful or that you found beautiful, and all right, I'll throw it away. Well, no, wait. I'll sell it. There is built into humanity, to certain kinds of people, the feeling that possessions end up being leeches on me. This is nothing new. People in the city feel this. It comes out in pseudo-mystical, would-be religious manners, as all of you should know. And as always, they go on too far or they stop too soon. Because what is normally referred to, I guess, in the city when they say things like, well, the guys don't want us to be tied down by possessions, or there's, right here in our Vedimicum, it says, you know, it's harder for a rich man to get to Peoria than it is for a camel to dance with a pig, or whatever it is. That there are directives saying that we shouldn't bother ourselves trying to get rich and collect all these worldly prizes here when, you know, who's going down in the grave with me? Not my Cadillac, etc. There is a molecular understanding. There's a cellular level of understanding that the possessions are meaningless. They are meant to impress bigger dogs. That's it. Now you can say, if you live in the city, you can say, well, you're right. A Toyota will get you from here to point B. They'll get me to work. But if I can afford it and I like it, let me tell you how much better a Ferrari is. Now, I know you're going to say $70,000 for a car, but wait. You get what you pay for, and then you go off on this great spiel. But you people are supposed to be big boys and girls. We're talking about trying to impress bigger dogs. That's it. You can talk as long as you want to, but you're missing it if you don't just see it. That's all it is. That's all it is. It may be fun to drive. Possessions. In fact, now that I think about it, I don't even have to look for another term. Oh, foolish me. Status symbols. There it is. Everybody knows that term. They had that term before I was born even. That's exactly what it is. But possessions. Many of you keep slipping me little notes and you bring out things and conversations we're standing around that you keep suspecting that it would be of some benefit if you dealt with possessions, or you feel that they're possessions that sing siren songs to you and want to wreck your little ship on the rocks. About the time you think you're on the verge of going into some great spiritual orbit, God, you're overcome again with the desire for a new Ferrari. So, in response to this great spiritual need of this flock, I will tell you something else about possessions. If you really want to be, if you want to learn how to be free in all manners and all respects, or you can put all this in quotation marks, to be free from possessions, I'm going to tell you exactly how to do it. You've got to make yourself more useful, more attractive than any possession you got. And that's it. That's it. You're then free. And it's about recess time, so we'll ring the bell and you're all free. But now don't push each other and fall down in the mud.